Hey guys, welcome back again to the Football Diary podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. You've picked a pod where United have just been absolutely taken apart 5-0 by Liverpool at home, down to 10 men, in what I probably feel, and definitely feel actually, is the worst half of football I think I've ever seen United play. So we're going to dive into there and kind of pick apart what this means for United going forward. We've not heard any news or confirmation yet of what's going to happen at the top to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. But clearly, this is the most voices we've ever heard calling for his head, really, or for at least his resignation and having a bit of dignity. So, yeah, we're in the dark still about what might happen. There's plenty of speculation in the media. There's a few leaks, I think, in the camp as well about what's been going on behind the scenes. But, Dave, if you can try and sum up in some way how you're feeling at the minute after that absolute shambles of a game.
Well, a feeling of emptiness, I suppose you could say. Not surprised by the actual form, the result. I'd probably say more so the performance. It's no shame losing to a team of Liverpool's quality, a great team, but the way that it unfolded was, it was catastrophic, really. So no surprises, but in terms of the way that the game went, the first half, like you mentioned, was probably the worst I've seen from United in years. And the thing is, we've been saying this for a while now. We keep saying it. We've been saying it for probably last 12 months, 18 months. It's an ongoing, recurring theme where we are seeing terrible performances, terrible halves of football, and for us looking to, pull it back in the second half, that's been a recurring theme. But the performances of late have just been getting worse and worse. And, as a United fan, that was just so disheartening to watch. And, worst of all, being against our bitter rivals.
There's not really much else could have gone wrong on the day, is there really? I think the fans, but booing as loudly as they did at half time, I don't think I've heard that at Old Trafford either. I mean, even against Atalanta when we were 2-0 down, the support was there and that kept them going. But you're not going to come back from a 4-0 deficit at half time against this Liverpool team playing like that. I mean, where do we start? Tactically, it was just absolutely all over the place. We had defenders who were banging form for club and country, Maguire and Shaw, playing horrendously out of position, passed around by their attack. I don't know what the instructions were, but they looked like they were trying to do a pressing game all of a sudden against Liverpool of all teams. How do you even begin to analyse this tactically from a United point of view, Dave?
Well, we've had there's been a lot of excuses, and obviously a lot of people are saying, if Bruno had scored that chance early on when it was still 0-0, it might have been a different game. But no, it's, that us scoring a goal at the start wasn't ever going to change, how compact we were as a team. It's not all of a sudden going to make us defensively, sound. We've conceded, 21 goals in 9 games now. We've got some of the worst statistics for defensive actions. I think for tackles, we only made 5 tackles in that game, as you mentioned here. And I think we're 18th for goals conceded.
Shocking.
And we're last for tackles made in the whole in the league. So shows, there's clear deficiencies within our team that are just, gaping holes that needs to be rectified, really. And it's not being looked like it's going to be fixed. But in terms of the game itself, you only have to look at that first goal. That's probably some of the worst defending I've seen. And I keep saying this. I keep saying, that's some of the worst defending I've seen. But that really was almost like when you go to play football as a youngster, as a young boy, and everyone's chasing the ball, and leaving huge gaping holes over the rest of the pitch. That's all it was. And then Luke Shaw was on his own somehow, and the centre backs completely missing. Again, like you mentioned, it was the pressing game that we're looking to potentially play, and there's rumours that have come out today, and that players have been dumbfounded by our tactics to play a pressing game when there was no preparation in the build up to the game to deliver that. And it was exposed, it was here and there where it was happening. It's never collectively, it was Bruno, it's headless chicken stuff really. It was just individual, and I mean that sums up as a team, a bunch of individuals. There's no together there. And Liverpool just brutally exposed us. They weren't even particularly, at their best really. I don't think they got out of first gear. There were times in that first half when we did get sort of recover the ball further up the pitch, and we had opportunities to attack and create chances, and we did create a couple of things in that first half. But defensively in the midfield, it's just a complete confusion. To me, I just don't know how we're trying to set up and what we're trying to achieve. That's before we even start talking about our attacking side, where we struggle to break teams down, etc.
It's funny you mentioned like headless chickens and like men against boys and things like that. These are the kind of things that are coming out publicly from the players now. David De Gea has even sort of said on Twitter, I think it was, that it was like we were playing schoolboy football, like we're a bunch of kids. It was that embarrassing, really, wasn't it, to watch? And you could see the holes being picked through the team, like the defence wasn't even there. It's almost like they'd not studied the way Liverpool have played over the last 2 to 3 seasons, and see their interchanges between the front three, the wing backs, and it was just so easy for them, wasn't it? And I think, like you said, they weren't even out of third gear ever during the game. And I think when they came out for the second half, scored a fifth, and United rightly went down to 10 men with the Pogba red card, which is another layer of embarrassment, really, isn't it? The writing was definitely on the wall. I was fearing an absolute drubbing, but you could kind of see a bit of sympathy from the Liverpool players. They were kind of easing up on us massively. They had a few pot shots from distance, but apart from that, didn't really try and score more. And it's kind of a thankful thing, really, that they didn't, because it could have been an absolute record-breaking scoreline against us, which, I mean, that's unrecoverable, isn't it, in anyone's book? But where does it leave Solskjaer now with it staying at just 5? Does that mean this kind of result is acceptable if he stays on? What kind of message does that send out? Where do United go from here, from a coaching point of view? What's the next step?
Yeah, I think we're at the current point of no return now, and we've been saying that for a while, with some of the results that have been coming, but I think this is the moment.
Felt like it.
Yeah, it's that there is no return. And it's sad to say, as a player, he'll always be a legend at the club, and people want him to do well because they like him as a person, and he's a very likable guy. But it's been mentioned there's levels in areas of the game in terms of management and as a player, where sometimes you just don't quite cut it at that level. And I feel like as though Solskjaer has probably been found out. And it's been difficult, really. It seems as though, there's been a lot of talk about inexperience in our coaching setup and staff learning on the job, almost like an apprentice.
But they're not learning, though. That's the thing. They're not learning anything. These results and these kinds of performances are happening so often, yet the same setup happens. We lost to Atalanta almost at one point and pulled it back from the brink, but we set up the same way against Liverpool as we did against Atalanta. And Paul Scholes called it, didn't he? He said, I don't know why we're celebrating this, because if we play like that against Liverpool or any top team, we'll be 4-0 down at half time. Exactly what happened. So I don't know if they are learning on the job, and I don't know if Solskjaer saying that we're not finished yet. I'm not finished yet. We can still get to where we want to be. Whether that means anything anymore, whether he's got any more progress in him as a coach, because I really don't think he has. This is kind of his very limit. And to be honest, he's gone well beyond my expectations. I didn't think he'd stay this long in the job. I don't think he'd produce some of the performances we've actually had. But then he's had a massive transfer kitty to be able to get a team that he needs and wants. So no excuses really anymore. I think this is where United fans are becoming just angry with everything again. And it's not Solskjaer's fault. It's really not. He's not in a job because he's chosen to be in the job. They picked him. The board picked him. The Glazers picked him because he's an easy target for fans to kind of vent their fury at, isn't he? He's their shield from criticism. So where do they go next? Is there a coach, do you think, that would be right for United at the moment? Or is there a coach that you think that the board are going to pick to suit their narrative and be a yes man? Which way is it going to go?
Well, if they have an idea for the long term, then they might be looking at something short term potentially, just as I don't like to say stopgap, but often talk of Conte at United, who I feel as though it can't really get any worse at the moment. So any coach that we can get in, a world class coach at that, and come in and implement his ideas into this team, because we're lacking everything, let alone a shape.
Do you see Conte as a short-term appointment then? If he was to get the job, would you say that's 2 seasons maybe max?
Going off of his history as a manager, he's never really hung around anywhere any longer really than 3-4 years. So can you say that's short-term nowadays though? That's quite long as a coach. The way the merry-go-round that is the manager business nowadays. So, I mean, look, wherever he's gone, he's won something. He went to Chelsea and obviously won the league. Won a cup as well. And I know a lot of people said that about Jose when he first came to United. He's a winner, but I feel like as though Conte is still in present day football, still in modern day football, and he's shown that he can still compete, at the highest level. So, I mean, a lot of people say about his style of football isn't particularly, as easy on the eye, but I think a lot of that gets a bit distorted in the fact that he likes to play 3 centre backs and then sort of like a wing back system, and he sometimes has a 3-4 or a 3-5-2, however you want to dress it up. But he's, even when he was at Chelsea were a team that were a machine of a team. They scored goals. They weren't necessarily boring to watch. They were, there was a lot to admire about that team.
Yeah.
As a fan, as a United fan, it probably wouldn't be, my first pick if there were more managers that were available out there. But I feel like there's probably a lack of real top class managers out there at the moment. Obviously, there's talk of Zidane, but whether he's a bit sceptical managing in the Premier League again. And then you've got the likes of Ten Hag, who's at Ajax, but he won't become available probably until the summer because he's in obviously the season with Ajax. He's probably a bit more of an unproven manager, but they've got to be clever about it, United, and they've got too many appointments wrong in the past. What's that? 4 managers in 8 years, is it now? I think. So I know we keep saying about the United way, but I don't think that's done us any good.
No. I think it's a case of, I look at Liverpool in the 90s and I feel like we're at that same kind of crossroads. Liverpool in the 90s were kind of clinging onto this pass and move Liverpool way. It was only when they sort of got Houllier and Benitez in, they started sort of changing the way they played. And United are in that rut, really. I think there was an article on The Athletic about it, about Solskjaer being a bit like Roy Evans in the 90s, where he was like a fan favourite, a club legend, but stayed on for like a year too long. And Liverpool lost momentum in the 90s. They had a very talented team. And I think he said something like the winning mentality that Ferguson had at the time was not instilled in Liverpool back then. And there's kind of shades of that now with United, where Liverpool have got this machine of a winning mentality. They never know when they're beaten. They're winning constantly. That's taken a couple of years. But then Solskjaer's been in the job coming up to 3 years now. And is he anywhere closer to being that kind of winning mentality? Absolutely not. In fact, he feels like the kind of manager who doesn't know how to give a hairdryer at halftime. Do you know what I mean? I think I've heard in the Atalanta game that it was Ronaldo who actually galvanised the players at halftime, just out of absolute shame and embarrassment. And I kind of believe it, I can't see Solskjaer making a team of elite athletes perform better with his words. He seems just too nice. Is that his fault? No, absolutely not. But it just shows the level you need to get a team like United to the next level. So who would do that? Yeah, I think I would love to say someone like Nagelsmann at Bayern, but he's going to keep winning there, isn't he, for the next few seasons at least, and unless something absolutely mental goes wrong. But I wouldn't look at Pochettino anymore. I don't think he can get a team of superstars performing in Paris at the minute, let alone in Manchester. So he's kind of off the radar now for sure. Ideally, you'd like someone like Thomas Tuchel, who's probably the best coach in the world at the minute, but he's very rooted in the European champions at the moment. Look what he's done there. So I don't want to accept, as a United fan, a stopgap, but you've kind of got to for the short term, haven't you? This is the reality of things at the minute. Like you said, there's no managers really available at an elite level. You're kind of looking for potential managers who look like they're going to be elite in a few years' time. So tactically, someone who fits that bill would be great. Conte would be a good sort of short-term appointment. I say short-term, a couple of years is fairly long to medium-term at the minute, like you said. But he'd be good to kind of get this bunch of superstars performing, I think, definitely. Don't think he'd be very popular with the board or with the players, but he'd be fairly strict in the way he applies himself. And I think that's needed. Not Jose Mourinho strict. We've been down that road. We don't want toxicity in the club again. Definitely not. But some balance between accepting mediocrity and striving for perfection, and somewhere in the middle would be ideal for United at the minute, because the players are good enough. We've seen them all perform at a high level at some point in the last year or two. But as a team, no way. The coaching's not there. It just needs to happen ASAP. Like you said on the last pod, this run of games we've got is just insane, isn't it? And it could all go belly up. It really could. Brings me on to my next question, actually, Dave. Looking at the next game, what kind of team would you pick if you were in charge of United now? Would you go for wholesale changes and change the whole back four, bring in, Telles, Bailly, kind of really sort of reshape the team and give players like Lingard, Mata a chance? How would you play it?
Well, it's, funny you mention that, because I was saying that I thought Solskjaer might be a bit clever about it and make a couple of changes for the Liverpool game. I did say about Jesse Lingard. Now he offers, that pressing side to his game. He offers a lot of energy. He takes up those clever positions in the final third. We've seen him do it. We've seen him do quite well against Man City over the last few years when he's played for United. And he's been a shrewd sort of, picking in that first 11. And yeah. I was really surprised, actually. I thought he might be one to come in. I thought Solskjaer might look at that first half in the Atalanta game. I thought he might potentially come in for Mason Greenwood, because Greenwood, he's a good, brilliant player. I know how good he is on the ball, but he's still learning the side of, tracking back and helping out defensively.
Yeah.
Looking to kind of see where he can influence the game off of the ball. I don't feel like he's always off making those runs through the channel and dropping off into pockets of space. So I thought that was a strange one, and I thought it was very naive of Solskjaer to go with that same 11 again. And seeing how he performed in that first half, it was a real eye opener. And he obviously made the same mistake again in the Liverpool game, and again he did the same thing by bringing Pogba on to change the game, and it was already too late by then. Obviously, the damage was done, and I feel as though, for me, I might try and make a couple of changes, just potentially give the some of the players a bit of encouragement. I feel as though there's a couple in there probably would need a rest. I think Greenwood probably needs a bit of rest, of a rest. Still very young, so I'd probably bring someone like Lingard in there, because he does offer a different dimension. And the midfield, the thing is, we've tried everything in midfield, apart from bringing Van der Beek in there. Whether that's something that, whoever, if Solskjaer's still in the job or not, we don't know. He's obviously not going to, Solskjaer isn't going to play Van der Beek. But it's something we don't actually know ourselves, whether he actually works with those players, whether they complement, whether he complements them or vice versa. So it's still a bit of an unknown, really. And, whoever comes in, it's looking likely now that there's going to be a change. Then it would be, I'll be happy just to see him get a chance, because I feel like he's not had the opportunity to try and compete for a spot in the first team, and it's been really saddening to watch at times, especially in how he came onto the scene and scored on his debut, and kind of just disappeared in sort of obscurity. So I don't think there will be too many changes. I feel as though we kind of do have, the pieces that are in there. Whether we'll see Jadon Sancho come back in or not, obviously that's another thing. Obviously Rashford's only not long returned back from injury, and Sancho's kind of gone missing for the last couple of games on the most part. So there are a lot of options there. It's all kind of ifs, whats, and maybes at the moment, I feel.
Yeah, I think if there were to be changes, there's certain players who I think deserve to not play. Definitely, I don't really think you can actually justify Van der Beek being out of the team anymore, because, like you say, the options we've had in there so far have not been anywhere near good enough. So let's shake it up a bit. We feel like we've got nothing to lose at the moment. But again, it depends if Solskjaer is the man to be in charge still for the next game. But we'll see. It's a big, big run ahead of us, and how it goes could define how badly we finish this season, because it feels like we're sinking quite dramatically. On the other hand, though, Liverpool are firing on all cylinders at the minute. They didn't really get out of third gear against United, but what a statement result from them, really, for the rest of the league, putting a neutral hat on for a moment. They blew away a pretty poor United team, but I think the way that the team was changed for the game, and they brought in Konate, they took off Mane and brought in Jota, didn't seem to make much difference. They were equally as dynamic. In fact, I don't think Konate's conceded a goal since he's been in the team, actually. Whenever he started, they've not conceded. So he seems like quite a dependable addition to the squad. I think Liverpool are looking really solid, and spectacularly so. I think if you look at their front line, Salah's in the form of his life, isn't he? So head-to-head with Liverpool and Chelsea, I think, for the title beckons. I'm not ruling Man City out completely, but them two look pretty solid at the minute, don't they?
Yeah, they, they weren't really tested. Brentford have given, many teams have given Liverpool a better game than what we did. They're probably a little bit fortunate in getting that clean sheet. Ronaldo looked like he had a perfectly good goal, ruled offside for some reason. But other than that, they did look comfortable, and you've got to give credit to them, really. I know, obviously, you talk about Konate, who had a good game, and he's had his injury troubles over his years. But they could have a real player in there if he can stay fit, and Van Dijk is another one. Obviously, got Joe Gomez in there as well, who's yet still could come in and play a part. But yeah, I think the main difference between this season and last season is Liverpool look far more, dangerous going forward. Salah looks like he's got the appetite to do real damage to any team he comes up against at the moment. And Firmino can drop in there. I mean, yesterday they had two of their first choice midfielders weren't even playing, in Thiago and Firmino.
Yeah, their midfield looked a bit limp, actually. They had Milner and Henderson in, which, wasn't screaming pace to anybody, but they were comfortable in the end, really.
I mean, they completely missed out the midfield at times. It went straight from defence, or their fullbacks in Alexander-Arnold and Robertson, straight from them, bypassed the midfield and into the feet of their front men, and they were cutting through at will, and United really made it easy for them. Really. It was a bit embarrassing.
Fair enough. I mean, it's difficult to gauge how good Liverpool are based on that performance, granted. I do think a shout out for Roberto Firmino there. I thought he linked up play fantastically. And I think whenever there was an opportunity to pass through the defence and split them in two, he played it really, really well. So he's been doing that for a while anyway. But I think him and Salah have got this telepathic understanding now on a different level, really, to what they've had before. So that looks dangerous. Speaking of terrible performances as well, I want to switch it to Chelsea against Norwich now, because Chelsea won 7-0 in the end. There's been a few debates on social media about whether this Norwich team is the worst team in Premier League history. And there's a few. You remember the Derby team from 15 years ago? Huddersfield were terrible when they were in the league. And I think even Norwich, their last appearance in the league, were pretty bad as well. There's a few teams that have struggled to get past sort of the 10-point mark even. This Norwich team looks like it could be that bad. I can't see them getting a goal, getting a win at this rate. Is this the worst team in Premier League history? Could United keep a clean sheet against these? How bad are Norwich and how good are Chelsea?
I think the thing with Norwich is we've seen how, competent they are in the Championship, and I would say how easy they find to get straight back into the Premier League, because they really are a bit of a yo-yo team at the moment. But I can't see them sticking with Farke next time they're in the Premier League.
Oh, so you think they'll be back then, basically? You think they'll get promoted again if they do, when they get relegated?
If they're smart and it's a bit of a sly move, they'll probably stick with him. He might decide this is his last season. He might decide this is the furthest I can take this team. I've had a good go of it, but knowing sort of how managers are and how stubborn they are, I'll be surprised if they did. But the club themselves, they could stick with him, get promoted, and then potentially think, what, we've been here twice before and we've not managed to stay up. Maybe we'll give someone else a try. And we've seen teams before where they've, switched managers out as they've been promoted. So, I mean, it's not entirely unrealistic. But yeah, they're definitely, they're the beating.
Lacking any ambition, aren't they? I think what does it for me is that they seem quite content, or the board seem quite content to be that sort of yo-yo team, like the 22nd best team in England. Because, I mean, they've kept on a manager like Farke, who has only got one way of playing and he sticks by it religiously, even though they're getting absolutely hammered. He's still got Timu Pukki up front, who's decent, but he's not next level quality, is he? And they sold arguably their best player once they've been promoted in Buendia, just to cash in on him. That just screams no ambition whatsoever to me. So maybe this is what they're happy with, bouncing between Premier League promotion payments, parachute payments for getting relegated.
The acquisitions they've made are a bit questionable. Obviously, to speak about Brandon Williams, who, has come from he's questionable defensively, I feel. He had a great first season, but last season he played a bit of a bit part role last season, played here and there, but he was a bit underwhelming for me. So that was a bit of a questionable acquisition in terms of where Norwich need to improve. They're clearly defensively vulnerable, and it's something that needs to be addressed. And it doesn't look like it's going to be, let's be honest, with how many games is in now, 9-10 games, and still getting heavily defeated.
But they didn't reinvest any of the Buendia money, which is surprising. You think they'd look at a few gaps in the defence, for example, and go, do you know what, I could maybe spend £10 million on a really solid Premier League proven player. And they never did. And I think that's the only reason Burnley are in the Premier League, is because they've consolidated by buying a few average Premier League players, really, and not being any worse than they were the year before. Although that might be about to change this season, but that's another story. But yeah, no end of lack of ambition from Norwich, which is just a bit gutting to see. And I think they're only the Premier League's worst team, in my opinion, in history, because even the average teams in the Premier League now are pretty good and they spend a bit of money. It feels like the gap between the bottom three teams this year and the rest is getting wider. So yeah, Chelsea exposed that quite brutally. On that note, did you feel like Chelsea showed you the best of them, or were they similar to Liverpool? Didn't really have to get out of third gear.
Yeah, they were clinical. Then they took advantage of a lot of errors in that setup for Norwich. They just made it look easy, really. It could have been more than 7. Obviously, was it Mason Mount penalty as well? So it could have been, a cricket score. But I think the feeling really, and it must be frustrating for Norwich fans, is that they can't really have a great deal of expectation at the moment. That must be really disheartening. So, on a weekly basis, they're probably surprised if they're struggling to score goals, let alone keep them out. So, we're early on in the season, but it's looking quite ominous.
Yeah, I think a word on Chelsea as well. They were without Lukaku and Werner for this game, yet still managed to put 7 past them. So I think that just kind of shows the strength and depth they've got. And they've been playing a few sort of second string players in Ross Barkley and Callum Hudson-Odoi, and they've done really well when they've come in as well. So it does look like their squad is probably the strongest in the league at the moment. So that's ominous, the fact that they didn't really have to flex their squad options that much, and they were missing 2 very able goal scorers as well.
That's one thing I do like about Tuchel, is that he looks to have he looks like he's able to get a bit more out of the players who are sort of on the fringes, and
Definitely.
It looks like they want to play for him. So that's something that is quite a rare quality of managers that that you like to see, and it's something you see from a few other managers. Pep's one of them. He seems to get a lot out of his players that are sort of play bit part roles, and they can come into a system and they know comfortably what their responsibilities are, and what he's asking of them. So
yeah,
that's refreshing to see, because like you say, there's players like Ross Barkley we thought would be a goner, let's be honest.
There's a few. I think Kepa as well. I was surprised that Kepa's still on the books, but he's rotated his goalkeepers for cup competitions and kept kind of Kepa interested, and he's done okay.
Obviously, Trevor Chalobah has come in as well, and quite well, scored a couple of goals this season as well. So I mean, they're well equipped for the season, and they're still in all the competitions, which I'm sure they'll be looking to make inroads and an improvement on last season. Even though they won the Champions League and they got to an FA Cup final, they'll do well to improve on that. But certainly, they're one of the teams that look like they're going to be up there, and with Man City and Liverpool, it's going to be a 3-horse race.
Yeah, I think so. And looking at the Premier League as well, results that kind of stood out for me, it's probably Leicester's win at Brentford. Brentford played really well, as they tend to do for most of sort of spells of the game. So how are Brentford coming undone? But also Leicester seem to be finding some kind of rhythm again. Youri Tielemans with another absolutely fantastic goal. What's your take on that game?
Yeah, it was actually a really entertaining game to watch as a neutral, and Leicester look like they're starting to gather a little bit of momentum, albeit probably not entirely as convincingly as the United game, but they just had that cutting edge and quality to put Brentford to the sword. And Brentford, by no means can't really have, I wouldn't be ashamed by that performance. I thought they could have easily got something out of that. But I think Thomas Franks has shown what a great coach he is. I think he's done really well, and it's something that I kind of kept tabs on when they were in the Championship and they were coming up. You can see they've got a way of playing, and they're entertaining to watch, and they're not just we were talking about Norwich and saying they like to play football and they like to play good football, but he actually gets thoughts, and he's able to be productive with a team that's come straight out of the Championship. He's made a couple of signings in there, but it's largely the same squad that you had the previous year. And they've made the transition to the Premier League really well and impressed me. I didn't earmark them for relegation. I said they'd stay up because I thought they looked like a promising outfit, and they've been a good addition. That I feel like there's been sort of similarities between them and Leeds' first season in the league. Albeit they'll play slightly differently. Leeds are a little bit more gung ho and a bit more energy, but it's been a breath of fresh air, I feel, because we've still got quite a few teams at the bottom of the league. I feel like the golfing quality in the Premier League is getting wider.
It is.
Becoming the bottom half, those last 6 or 7 teams in the bottom half of the league. And the winning margins are becoming bigger. Teams are getting battered again, especially from those top 3 or 4 teams, the likes of Arsenal, Man City, Chelsea, Liverpool, really starting to score quite a few goals against some of the teams at the bottom, and it's great to watch. But in terms of Brentford are definitely they've shown that they compete with the big boys in this league. Obviously got a point from Liverpool, and it'd be interesting to see where they end in the season, and I'd be more than happy to see them stay in the league.
Yeah, definitely. I think they are, when you consider the Championship table last season and where Brentford finished in comparison to sort of Norwich, it does make you wonder, doesn't it, about playing styles and how different they kind of adapt to the Premier League. And Brentford seem like a Premier League team in waiting for about 3 seasons now, haven't they? They've stuck to their philosophy and it's kind of paid off. They've given most teams they've played against a really good game. And the question for them is turning like spells of dominance that they have, like 20 minutes here, half an hour there, into goals. And that's the only thing missing, really. It's just that creativity. But yeah, great addition to the Premier League. The middle of the Premier League's looking really tight now. So from Brighton in 5th, all the way down to sort of, Arsenal, I think, a 10th, and even Wolves just below them. There's only like a couple of points separating them. So and United are kind of mixed up in that as well now. Arsenal are in there, Leicester are in there, Everton are in there. That mid-table sort of 5th and below is becoming quite congested. So that might be the new entertaining level of the Premier League. If the top becomes even more predictable and the bottom becomes even more predictable, then the middle of the league is where it's at, really. So yeah, fascinating to look at. Question for you. I'm not going to look at Premier League anymore because I think the rest was fairly predictable. But did you see any of El Clásico? And would you say Koeman and Barcelona worse or as bad as Solskjaer and Man United at the minute?
It's hard to say anything was worse than that performance from United, but yeah, again, we spoke about obviously Barcelona the other week, and to a lesser degree, Real Madrid.
Yeah, they've got big problems financially, haven't they? I think they've got a lot of debt that they're not going to be able to service really without selling players. Are they going to be able to hang on to the likes of sort of Gavi and Pedri and De Jong going forward? Because I think the gulf between them and like Atletico and Real Madrid is massive now. And for all we look at Klopp and Solskjaer and how different they are at the minute, if you look at Ancelotti and Koeman, tactically they're so far apart. You can just tell that one's on a different level to the other. I can't see Barcelona getting back to challenging for honours anytime soon. Sad, really.
Yeah, obviously, Barcelona. I think the fans are still kind of coming to terms with, the transition that they're currently going through, and I don't know whether it's, the club is clearly in, a state, from the top of the hierarchy is, it's been a bit of a disaster for a while now, and whether it's as much of a problem on the pitch, I'm unsure. They've, like we say, they've got a lot of young, talented players in there. Obviously, they've got Koeman in as well as a manager. I know that he's got a lot of skeptics, and whether he's the right man or not. But it's a similar sort of situation with obviously Solskjaer is a club legend. Both managers who've scored late goals in European pivotal European fixtures, and you look at kind of the loyalty that Solskjaer gets, and it's, you know, that I saw something online of the differences between Solskjaer was still signing autographs for fans outside the ground after that 5-0 drubbing for Liverpool.
Yeah.
Barcelona got, you know, beat, you know, 2-1, okay, by Real Madrid, and he's getting mobbed outside the stadium, Koeman, and, you know, fans are pelting his vehicle. You know,
Yeah.
there's a big cultural difference in between, you know, those both sets of fans, and, you know, in Spain and England. So I don't know whether it's as bad as what it's made out to be in terms of on the pitch. Obviously, we know it's terrible off, and there's a lot of uncertainty, really, over what will be done with the club. But I feel as though that as a fixture, yeah, Real Madrid were clearly the better team. It probably should have been more comfortable than what the scoreline suggested. But again, it's something that just needs to, the fans need to be a bit realistic where they are at the minute. And, you know,
So you're saying that Solskjaer and Koeman are as bad as each other? Is that what you're saying?
I'd say Koeman's a better manager than Solskjaer. You know, he's more experienced. We've seen him do well for certain teams in certain periods. Okay, you know, he's had moments where he's not been great, but you know, I feel they're both limited managers. They're you know, they're both in positions where they probably, it's a little bit unfair for them to be in those positions, and kind of put them under that sort of scrutiny and pressure that they're under, because are they, you know, just shields for kind of to deflect the blame, you know, going to the board?
Seems that way, doesn't it? Yeah, they're kind of easy targets in the minute, aren't they? Interestingly, Football Manager's about to be released, and there's a video game streamer who streams himself playing Football Manager, and he did a video where he simulated Barcelona being managed for 5 and 10 years and to see where they got on, and they start the game £1 billion in debt, so it doesn't end well. So in 5 years down the line, you know, they've sold off most of their best players. They don't win La Liga again in the next sort of decade, I don't think, as a simulation. And it does feel a bit like that now. It feels like they're kind of losing momentum in terms of challenging for honours, which is sad, because I think La Liga needs Barcelona to be at the top of their game, really. So, yeah, a bit of a strange dynasty ending there. And I think financially that's why they're going to struggle to get out of that hole, where United, on the other hand, have still got financial clout. So they just need a top draw manager, really, to spend that money wisely, don't they, and get that team into shape. But enough about United anyway. God, I don't know what kind of podcast we're going to have next week. It's United Spurs next, isn't it? Is the next game for them, which is, who knows which way that could go, the way Spurs are playing at the minute as well. But either way, will you be joining me on the next pod?
Yeah, I'll be here. You know, if I'm here today, I'm going to be here next week.
Do you know what? Yeah, I honestly didn't know whether I'd be able to have to do this pod on my own, because Miles, congratulations, he's just got married, so he's out of the question. So it's just me and you, and I always kind of thought to myself, is this even going to happen? Are you going to muster up the enthusiasm to talk about United at all? But thank you for joining me anyway, mate. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome.
No worries. Well, thanks for watching the Football Diary podcast again this week. I hope it's not been too downbeat from a Man United fan's point of view for you guys to watch. But please, if you like what you're watching and it's entertaining, at least, just give us a like, give us a follow, give us a subscribe if you can. That'd be a massive, massive support. And until next time, thanks again. See you soon.